Hi, everyone. And Neil, you're online?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh,
How are you
perfect.
doing?
Very well, thank you. Why don't we make a start? Thank you, everyone, for being here. Welcome to the sixth webinar in our Sustainable and Smart Building series. Hi, my name's Pubs Bayasuri, so I'm the Associate Director at CLP, looking after Smart Energy Connect, where we provide smart energy management solutions to our corporate customers. We're helping with energy saving, productivity, and environment management solutions. In the past, we've helped schools, large offices, commercial buildings, and factories to help energy, and also something that we're very, very passionate about here at CLP Innovation. Today, I'm delighted to have Neil Strother, who's a principal research analyst at Guidehouse, who focuses on IoT, smart metering, and energy management solutions. For more than 20 years, Neil has established an extensive in-depth pulse on market intelligence and is well plugged into the sectors as a whole through key touch points with customers and suppliers globally. He's a frequent speaker, and you may have seen his name or his face either at conferences or at publications such as Wall Street Journal, The Economist, Bloomberg, and a range of others. So he's got a really unique perspective of what's happening in the market. Neil worked with us, in fact, to write a white paper titled Digital Solutions for Smart Sustainable Buildings, and has an outlook on this space from a global viewpoint, but focuses in on Hong Kong and the Greater Bay Area. We'll start off with Neil sharing some insights from the paper to begin with, and then we'll move on to Q&A session, which I'll kick off myself, and then I wanted to ask the audience for questions as well. So Neil's in fact dialing in from Seattle. We've got some technical challenges on seeing video, but he's absolutely there on the line. So I'll pass it over to Neil to kick off, and Neil, I'll control the slide, so let me know when I should move on.
Yep, sounds good. And thanks a lot. Good morning to you all, and thank you, Pubs. It really is a privilege to be part of this webinar series on sustainable and smart buildings. And as Pubs noted, much of what I'll discuss here in these next slides comes out of the white paper that we at Guidehouse Insights did for CLP a little bit earlier this year. So on to the agenda slide here. I can't see it, but I do trust Pubs. So here is the agenda for what I'd like to cover today. I'll start off with some introductory comments about the current market, to give us all some context here. Then we'll take a look at defining a smart building. Then we'll look at this market's overall evolution. Then we'll follow that with the size and outlook for the smart buildings market from a forecast perspective. And then from there, I'll provide a snapshot of CLP's solution, which is called Smart Energy Connect. Then we'll dive a little deeper into some of the key technologies and services that make for a smart and sustainable building. Then I'll provide kind of a little roadmap of the steps that building owners and facilities managers should take as they make this journey. Then I'll have some comments about the benefits of investing in these kinds of solutions for smart buildings, and then wrap up with a few recommendations before we launch into kind of a Q&A session between Pubs and myself, and then the audience questions. Okay, so on the next slide, let's just get started. First, I'd like to share some context for this market. And I think the obvious big change agent here is the coronavirus or COVID-19. And we at Guidehouse Insights see the ongoing health risks will continue to change how commercial offices, especially how they're designed, leased, and used. And in addition, I think these smart building solutions will be even more compelling in the post-COVID-19 era, as these technologies help to improve access control, monitor space utilization, and enhance indoor air quality, optimize energy use, et cetera. So again, I think the drivers will continue once we get past the worst of this pandemic. Anyway, clearly we see plenty of opportunities for building owners and managers to adopt these advanced solutions as they try to optimize buildings of all use types, not just offices, but others including transport, utilities, manufacturing, et cetera. So on the next slide, let me briefly define and describe the smart building concept, which is not a new one by any means, but what is new, I think, are the advancements in machine learning, computer science, and these tools that can sift large data sets coming from an infrastructure comprised of various things like sensors, controllers, and communication devices. And this advanced hardware allows remote access to critical building systems such as HVAC, lighting, access control, things like that. And these are, many of the main consumers of energy within a building. So these advanced tools help a building owner or a manager to improve a building's energy and operational efficiencies. But the ultimate vision really for a smart building is a comprehensive solution, at least in our view, that integrates the hardware and the software in a way that it really fully optimizes all systems within a building. And moreover, a truly smart building provides those important efficiencies, but also helps the owner, the manager, and even the tenants reach their sustainability metrics across any type of facility. That's the vision anyway, and it's a lofty one, but again, I think the technologies and some of the fundamentals are now in place, at least at a fairly early stage for the adopters. Okay, on the next slide, a few thoughts now about the evolution of the smart building market. So before 2006, we had what is now referred to as the sort of that legacy building automation system, or BAS, as it's often called, which essentially involves a preset or schedule-based set of controls that support a reactive approach in the largest of commercial buildings. So think of long-term schedules for HVAC without any dynamic shifts based on occupancy or the actual space utilization. Then from about 2006 to 2012, we saw the evolution move toward more of a cloud-based and efficiency-based applications. And we saw the advent of EMS or energy management type software, which was scalable for some smaller customers or those that were in smaller buildings. And these systems offer actual insights for preventive type maintenance purposes using near real-time data. Okay, so moving on from there, from about 2012 until today, the market has continued to see some innovation with an emphasis on, again, software and analytics that help drive strategic decision making, and then moving to predictive maintenance, and then this continuous system improvement notion. And this allows building owners and decision makers to get a more holistic picture of the impact of all systems within building and not just in their silos. And then now we're kind of moving into this next phase of a digital transformation era with X as a service offerings becoming a little bit more common. And this is based on technologies associated with the Internet of Things, or IoT. Again, cloud computing is still very important. Edge computing, it hasn't gone away either. And then this kind of new area about more basics around occupancy sensing. So that's important. So anyway, the result is a much more seamless analysis of energy and non-energy business metrics within buildings, and then a deeper integration with all the facility systems. And the innovation really just goes on and on, if you will. All right, so on the next slide, we'll take a look at the market sizing and the outlook. And first off, we see the overall market for digital solutions as a very real and growing thing. It's not just a lot of hype. We actually see some traction. And for Hong Kong, Guidehouse Insights estimates smart building revenue associated with hardware, software, and services is expected to grow from about $57 million this year to roughly $112 million in 2025 at a compound annual growth rate of 18.6%. And for the rest of the Greater Bay Area, the forecast calls for revenue increasing from about $574 million this year to $1.3 billion in 2025, with a healthy compound growth rate of 23.1%. Again, to underscore the point here, this is a market that should grow quite well in the coming years, despite some of the current challenges we're all facing really due to the pandemic and the ensuing kind of fallout. Okay, on the next slide, I'd like us all to consider the CLP Smart Building Solution or platform that's called, again, Smart Energy Connect. This platform is an example of the type of innovation for smart buildings that can really help drive adoption of the solutions within the region. And what CLP offers is an end-to-end service that features a range of components that can be used on an individual basis or as part of a complete smart building solution, which can include advisory services, hardware, installation, and software, and all of that backed up by a secure cloud. Again, these solutions are curated by the CLP team and can meet the needs of a building owner or manager who is seeking a range of sustainable type solutions, from clean energy management, enhanced efficiencies related to energy, and for carbon offset purposes, to name just a few. Guidehouse Insights views the market in Hong Kong as quite similar to other quickly evolving smart buildings markets we see around the world, where there's an extensive building stock of existing high-rise commercial buildings that have legacy technologies, but that are ready for the latest or better technologies that can address these issues related to things like returning to work as a threat of the pandemic subsides, and then meeting other goals of shifting local climate change policies, and then again, this ongoing focus on sustainability. And on that point, owners and managers understand that employees, customers, and shareholders place a high priority on sustainability. And a platform like CLPs can be a great catalyst for adopting solutions that meet that demand. Okay, Pups, how are we doing? Okay?
Doing well. Key technologies and services.
Yep, there we go. On this next slide, one of the questions that comes up is what makes a building smart and sustainable? And one way to answer the question has to do with IT and OT convergence. I know that's been talked about a lot over the last few years across numerous industries, including buildings. And it's really become, I think, the cornerstone of the smart building. Historically, these two areas of the business were isolated. They often operated very independently from one another, from budgeting to decision-making and management of investments. But now, a smart building really requires breaking down these two silos, if you will, so that the systems and the technology that's already in place can talk to each other, and it's accessible and secure. That's no small task. It really is a complex blend of infrastructure and hardware and things like analytics and certain insights that can lead to certain actions. But if it's done well, it can provide really positive benefits. But this is, IT, OT integration is really a necessary thing if a facility or a building is ever going to realize the full potential of lower costs and broader sustainability improvements. So again, that's a key issue. All right, on the next slide, let me turn now just for a moment to the, what I call the roadmap concept and discuss some of the key steps we see that are necessary for a building owner or manager to get on this transformation journey, if you will, and create or provide a much smarter, sustainable building. I won't hit on all of these in great detail, but just as an overview, these are the ones we think are really worth considering. First of all, and this goes with so many other efforts within buildings, but set those longer-term goals and objectives for your investment in the technologies, such as what's your corporate sustainability goal? How does that fit in? And what are your expected cost savings? Do you have some kind of targets you think are attainable? And then what energy efficiency targets might you have? And maybe there's some numbers you can put around occupant satisfaction metrics. There's certain ways to get at those numbers. So with those goals in mind, then have a baseline, some kind of baseline measurement. It's essential to understand your starting point so you can evaluate any kind of impact that these technologies can provide and really tease out the benefits of a smart building technology deployment. The third step is to make the investments, and this can be a tough one, but define the scope of your investment. How much do you have at hand? What kind of financing might you need to put together? Set timelines, and some interim milestones that will get you, to your goals. And then the next step is to report your progress. Most successful projects involve a variety of stakeholders, including not only managers within a building, but oftentimes the C-suite folks as well. So it's vital to keep all those people in the loop on how your investment and project is moving ahead and how it's working, and also be very straightforward and transparent. What are some of the challenges you might be facing? This is a complex effort, and it's not always going to be a straight line course to success. Then the next thing you have to do, or as you deploy these technologies, is to monitor your results. It's an ongoing process of improvement, and it might include using tools for measurement and verification, and that can provide this continuous monitoring. And then you need to communicate the successes, telling others both inside your organization and outside that you've achieved some clear benefits and successes. And then lastly, there's this notion of continuously refining your efforts. A project like this is more of a technology journey, as I've said, than anything else. It's not a one-off. Okay, on the next slide regarding benefits, just a few words here on how a smart building solution, or more succinctly answering the question, why invest in these types of solutions? Well, I think it's pretty clear. A smart building technology deployment or effort or journey offers multiple benefits, including, as we've mentioned, sustainability improvements. Clearly, energy savings is at the heart of this. but also better and healthier indoor air quality can be a real, sustainable benefit. Space optimization has become, a premium of late, and there's other important advantages such as operational efficiencies, especially around asset management, if you will, and then clearly enhanced occupant satisfaction is a high one now in terms of keeping and getting new tenants and keeping existing ones. And again, these benefits can benefit not only the facility owner and manager, but for others as well, your tenants and people that visit that may be just more random. All right, next slide. Let me just wrap up here before we move into the kind of the Q&A part, the discussion part. A few recommendations for you. First, create a sensible strategy. Again, I think there are many smart building technologies that are available, and sometimes it can be a bit daunting to wade through all of those. So consider your investment strategy with a really long-term mindset at the beginning, and consider the many impacts across your portfolio. So do a deep dive really on your strategy. Then I think it's really key to rely on your partners who have expertise around energy. They have expertise in IT knowledge. And also, I think, a partner that's really valuable is one who brings in independence, that can give you some objective advice and support. And then next thing to do is find those integrated technology solutions and invest in those that are integrated, and kind of avoid those one-off upgrades. You might be more disappointed in doing that. And then lastly, use advanced technologies to help monitor and measure the sustainability impacts that can demonstrate the true ROI. So with that, I think the last slide, there's contact information for me if you want to follow up after this call or in the coming days. That'd be great. We'd love to help any of you folks on the call today if you have any research or want to go deeper with Guidehouse Insights. Anyway, that's it for the formal presentation. Happy to chat with you, Pubs. I know you and I get along really well, so this should be a lot of fun.
Cheers, and I totally agree that we are seeing a lot of progress in the space, and we're seeing a shift just even in the last couple of years on perceptions. There was one slide I wanted to touch on, which is on the roadmap. And I really like the Make Investments report and the monitoring results. And one of the questions that we dive into when we engage our customers is on benefits. Typically, how long do people realize benefits in what you've seen in the global market?
Yeah, it can really depend. I think it can be as quick as maybe 3 to 6 months, but sometimes it can take a year and a half or so. But it can, if you do it correctly, it can be rather quick. It just depends on the kind of hardware or legacy hardware and information systems and data you have in place, and then how much you have to install that's new. So it can be fairly quick, I would say.
So in Hong Kong, we've got a very dense set of buildings, and there's a high number of commercial buildings as well. Have you seen much success stories in commercial buildings?
Well, one of the best examples I have that's fairly recent is this BBVA commercial building in Madrid. BBVA is a large banking conglomerate with headquarters in the capital city, and they started with a smart building deployment with their headquarters building back in 2015, and it took some time for their facilities managers to discover some of these hidden insights, but what they gained was pretty interesting. From an energy perspective, they were able to shrink their emissions by, I'll just throw out some numbers, but I'll try to bring some context. 31 metric tons of CO2 per year were saved, which equals in their world about 41 households, or approximately 125,000 kilowatt hours in the first year. They were also able to reduce their energy consumption by 12 to 15% annually since 2015. That's a pretty long-term benefit. And I think those kinds of things, again, that's just exemplary, but I think that's an example where a truly, outfitted building with the sensors and the software and the ongoing monitoring can lead to very measurable successes. I mean, that's clear savings, and they continue to optimize that headquarters. It's actually a number of facilities on a campus, but it's pretty impressive.
Whenever we hear about double-digit returns, those certainly put a smile on our face as well. Um,
Yeah, yeah, and I wouldn't say that's a guaranteed. I always say, your mileage may vary, as we say here,
sure.
but I think that's a good benchmark. And again, whenever I hear, same with you, Pubs, when I hear double digit, my ears perk up, and I want to know more. And I'm sure in their case, at least in BBVA, they really scoped it out. So I think that's a good benchmark.
Uh, the other thing that I noticed in the presentation was your mention of AI. I love the idea of AI, but sometimes I have to be honest, to roll my eyes when I hear about it. Sometimes a bit of hype. Have you seen real
Yeah.
activity in this space, or is it still just mostly pilots?
It's moved. It's early stages for sure. I also roll my eyes, or I hear a lot of hype. Although I've been looking at AI kind of broadly speaking for a couple of years, and I think there is some early traction, but it's not always the case. And there's still plenty of pilots out there. But another example, again from a recent report I did on buildings and AI, comes from a big box retailer, we call that in the U.S. And the example, I don't have the exact name of the company. They weren't willing to share that. But anyway, this big box retailer had something like 2,100 different building locations across the U.S. and they hired an IT firm to help them implement their solution, smart building solution based on AI and machine learning models and whatnot. And it was pretty impressive. At least, some of the data or impact data that I have is interesting. They reported a 12% energy savings. I believe that's across, if not all facilities, but many facilities. They also were able to resolve some of their work orders within their, facilities managers. 83% of their work orders were resolved remotely, so that saved time, energy, et cetera there. They also saw a 26% reduction of in-store visits by technicians. So again, a real cost savings there. They saw a similar improvement in the mean time between failure of equipment. So about a 26% improvement in between those failures of equipment. And a 4% savings in overall maintenance costs. So again, some double digits, some single digit, and I think that's a really good real world example of where AI or smart building technologies, if you will, can really benefit across a large portfolio of buildings. Now again, would that be true in all cases? I don't know, but I think that's an impressive example that's real world. So yeah, that's one.
Okay, absolutely. Maybe I'll ask one more question. Just for the audience, if you've got questions, please write them down in the chat window. We'll dive into those in one sec. But just to ask one more, Neil, what are some of the more recent trends that you're seeing across the globe?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've got a number of them, really. You say that we're seeing emphasis on getting back to healthy buildings. That's clearly, in the current state. And another one is more around occupancy sensing. I know that, that technology is not brand new, but really specific occupancy sensing. In some cases, it can be, and it gets a little controversial whether that's facial recognition or people moving about, and it crosses into some sort of tough privacy areas. But again, I think specific who's in the building, where, when, and how can really change how a building acts and reacts, so that you're not heating or cooling or doing things in areas that are unoccupied or have limited use, and you're really getting the most out of those spaces that are being used. And I think that goes also for the tenant as well. I think that with these new sort of real-time occupancy type sensing capabilities, a building tenant can know, hey, traditionally it's been just kind of a 2x2 sort of, I've got 5,000 people, I need to put them in these buildings for this amount of time. And with these newer data sets, you can figure out that, hey, maybe I only need 3% less of what I thought I did, and so the tenant can save money, and the building is more efficient for the tenant's happier, lower costs, the building owner can then lease out other space. So I think that whole occupancy space area is really interesting. Another one that's kind of across industries, but clearly as companies move into smarter buildings, there is that growing threat. It's always there around cybersecurity or security threats from outside hackers. I think that's an ongoing trend. Whenever you digitize and have this transformation towards more data, that's a threat. I'm also seeing, again, we talked about the increased use of AI. I think that's starting to unlock, and I think the ongoing trend is that we'll start to unlock more things that we can't quite see yet. I fast forward in my mind 5 years, and the state of the art has changed. Where we see things through greater use of AI techniques, and then it gets shared. It's not just because right now I think it's like these examples I gave of BBVA and the big box retailers, kind of behind the scenes. And I think as more of those use cases and examples come to the forefront, others will adopt. I think a couple of others that I think are kind of exotic or maybe not exotic, but kind of on the edge and kind of cool and fun. I think we're going to see maybe not a lot more robots, but I think robots that are actually useful and not just sort of toys in buildings, I think could be a trend that's out there. And then one that's a little further out there, but I wrote about it in a blog recently, and that is around the quantum internet. So in the U.S., the Department of Energy and some labs in the U.S. and then other countries, other efforts around the world to create this quantum internet. So it's not like a second internet. It's more like using quantum technologies, or again, it's very early, and some of the stuff hasn't even been. It's in theory, it hasn't been invented, but would create a very secure way to send data and information, whether that's to the grid or building to building, et cetera. So I think that's kind of a behind the scenes long-term trend in the labs, if you will, but starting to, get some attention and money behind it that could benefit all of us in, whatever buildings we're in and whatever grids we're using. And I think that's important. And I think that'll probably translate into, connected buildings and connected cities as well. So those are some of the, big trends, big and smaller trends I see.
Right. And we are seeing similar kind of things in Hong Kong and the GBA area as well, which is very, very, very reassuring.
Yeah.
I think let's dive into some Q&A. We've actually got quite a lot of questions. Starting off with Michael, who's raised the question of, how do you differentiate from a lot of similar solutions out in the market?
That's a great question. That's the $64 million question. Well, I think a couple of ways. I would first suggest, does that vendor, whomever it is, do they have some kind of a track record or some provable use case or an ROI, or you probably don't want to be the first guinea pig. So I would maybe demand, but expect a provable use case, or can I talk to someone you've worked with, or can you show me really how do a demonstration in a small way, inexpensive on my end, so that if I make that investment. And again, I think the second thing I think I would do is to say, okay, how do you differentiate from what CLP can offer, or go to your trusted sources and then balance it against some of the. There's a lot of vendors out there, and then again, not to promote us, but look at outside advice or people that rank or rate or say kind of who's doing what in the marketplace. It can be. I don't mean to simplify this. It can be very daunting to try to tease out who the best is. But again, there could be a vendor out there that is very new and they have a great solution. Sometimes the innovators are right in front of you, and so I don't mean to discount them, but it is a challenge, and I think you have to really look for provable points that will make your investment a little safer and saner. Yeah, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, and I'd just like to add from a CLP point of view, we have in-house developed products as well as products that we partner with. And for the partner products, we go through a very lengthy process to test, and we test it in our own premises because we also want to be sure that these are reliable and give the returns before we even raise them with our customers. So I think going through that thorough process is really important, because something that works somewhere else doesn't necessarily mean we're going to get those same returns here. So I totally agree with your previous points.
Yeah, I agree.
Moving on, I had a question about more generally how IoT can help, but maybe I wanted to adjust the question a little bit, Neil, on what you see as big differentiators in IoT versus the BAS days.
Yeah, I think I kind of go back to I think the true outcome of IoT, it's that's a lot of sensors and connected thingies and all that, but I think it's really the volume and the velocity and the variety of data that if it's done right, and by that I mean really it comes down to the software and the learnings, that's the difference between the older days, if you will, the legacy days, that if you can get or harness that volume of data in the right way, and I think velocity is important, and then also timeliness. Near real time, and not all cases do you need real time, but having that ability to really adjust really creatively and impactfully on the fly is the real difference. And again, is it in all cases the latest greatest technology going to save you a whole bunch? Not necessarily, but I think the state of the art is we collectively are learning as we go. So I think, again, you don't want to overinvest. I think you can just go crazy, especially in a retrofit. You don't need to connect every single thing. That's, again, going back to strategy. I think you have to decide, okay, I've got these existing connected or non-connected processes or devices or things, but if I add a certain number of sensors or a certain number of gateways or communication capabilities or collectors or what have you, that with a fairly reasonable amount of investment in hardware, and then gain some knowledge from the data that they provide, and then rely on the vendor or your vendors that can say, hey, we've got a set of solutions, and don't buy all of it. I think you have to be specific on what your needs are. I want better occupancy sensing. I want higher efficiency from my energy systems, HVAC and whatnot, or I want some other goal in mind. Oh, I've got a sustainability goal. How can IoT hardware, software work together and integrate across previously existing silos to create better outcomes? Again, it's a road, it's a journey. There's no one-off, but that's a good question. I think you really have to, seek out what works best for your situation.
Yeah, and I agree on the flexibility that also comes about with this, because you do get a wider range of choice. But I think the other one that doesn't get mentioned enough is about the O&M costs as well. Because if you want to make changes from IoT solutions, it tends to be a little bit cheaper because you can find more providers. You've got a little bit more flexibility because the work and the technology is on the edge as opposed to integrated to the heart of the building.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Okay, I got a great one from MW on how are utilities approaching smart buildings, looking at it from an energy efficiency perspective or more from a broader perspective. Have you seen a winning formula? Maybe Neil, from the utilities that you interact with, did you want to share your views? And I can certainly add on CLP's views.
Yeah, I would definitely want you to add on. I wish I knew more about utility mindsets. I don't always. But I mean, I think that it's in the interest of, I think, generally speaking, all utilities, that they want more efficient buildings. If their customers are happy, they're happy. And again, I think because the grid is so, and I'm thinking maybe this is a North American perspective, but there's clearly a lot of what we call DER or distributed energy, renewable energies that are coming online. So a corporate client or a CNI client, like that big box retail, and others are maybe they're putting solar on their rooftops, or they're getting energy storage on site and whatnot. And again, it can create a conflict with the utility. But again, the utilities can't stop those trends of what their customers are doing. And I think smart utilities say that, hey, if the facility folks, the buildings that are our customers, if they're changing how they interact with us, and it may cost us financially, but isn't it good business to stay with them and partner with them and not just act like CLP, but I think CLP is a good example of, hey, as the market shifts, we need to be customer focused, whether that's a residential customer or a building facilities customer, as they switch around their needs. And again, I think through this pandemic, I think it's just evident that things are changing and moving, and it's not like us versus them. I think smart utilities are going to say, oh, we recognize this change in how buildings operate and how they interact with the grid. We need to be there too. We need to be supportive and not antagonistic. That's my view, and I think that's what smart utilities are doing.
And it's spot on in our views as well. We certainly a part of our core business is energy supply, but with energy efficiency, it's a real deeper conversation, because you're really helping businesses use our core product, and that's really exciting. Just to share a little anecdote, we've got a product called Plant Pro, which focuses on chiller optimization. So there, you can take an existing old chiller and then help it dynamically save energy, which is fantastic, because yes, you reduce the energy dependency on the building itself, but then you get a much happier customer, and you can have broader conversations about what else we can work with that customer, whether it be shopping malls or large commercial buildings, and you strengthen that deeper relationship. So it's not just a relationship through a bill, which is really, really exciting. And this is the kind of lens that we look at it. Sorry, Neil.
Yeah, one other point too that I meant to mention, and not to be neglected, is I think that because of in many jurisdictions the policymakers, the regulators, whatnot, they are encouraging with their rules to have much more efficient use of energy. So the goals align between the utility and the commercial industrial building customers. So I think that can be a very common ground as utilities move forward with their buildings customers. And I think that makes the conversation, as you say, exciting and interesting. So they're not working at odds. I think there's more of hey, our buildings are more efficient. That helps everybody. So we can move ahead.
Yep. Another question. This is less on the positive side. So question is, I already have some kind of smart solutions running in my building, but not happy with the performance. ROI turns out to be really falling short. Any figures or statistics or other experience that you see in the market about success versus failure?
Yeah, that's a great question. Not too many years ago, I'm thinking more kind of on the broad IoT. The failure rate's pretty high. I don't know, it was 90% failure or whatever, but I think a lot of that was early experimentation, poorly designed projects, misaligned goals within buildings and companies and whatnot. So I'm not surprised. I don't mean to think or say that IoT and smart building, none of this stuff is easy. If it were easy, it would be already here. So I do think you have to be very, very careful about, and then you're probably going to have a failure or two, or maybe three. So I'm not surprised. So you have to be really, really smart going in, and even so, maybe you'll have to bite a bullet and have some failures there. But again, I've seen companies that have failures but come back and redo it better. It's harder to do, again, but this is cutting edge, in many ways, cutting edge stuff, and you have to be willing to take a few hits. I mean, I think we all, not all, but even as consumers, we do that too. We'll try some new technologies, and sometimes you buy that thing or that new gadget or whatever, and it doesn't quite work. I think similarly, you have to be able to stomach some failures. Again, I know in business it's different. You've got shareholders and stockholders and people, people's money on the line, but I think that to not try and innovate is a mistake as well. So yeah, it's be careful, I guess, is the message from me. But don't be shy either. Again, yes. I think it goes back to measurement and really keep it, early on. The sooner it's not working, cut it off and re-engage or disengage or go a different route. And I'm not saying that is trivial by any means, but that's my sense of it.
It's before you start, it's an opportunity. After you fail, then it's a learning, sadly.
Yeah, well said, Pubs, well said.
But I think your point about goal setting is really important. There are opportunities, rather than diving in, is perhaps do some analysis first. So before putting in an automation, you can do some sub-metering, for example, just to understand the profile. And then you can really see if there is some opportunity for some savings. Yes, it's going to take 1 or 2 months extra, but then you may save some time down the line because you can go through a more hypothesis-driven or a data-driven approach before you go and implement that. Otherwise, you don't really have that deep discussion on goals, which I totally agree is really important.
Yeah, I like that layered approach because you don't want to go, you don't want to take, a blind leap of faith. You want to have some confidence, step by step as you go. And yeah, as you say, if it takes another month or two, you want to go fast, but you don't want to rush.
On the topic of cybersecurity, so a question from Anthony, found the discussion on cybersecurity on IoT very interesting. What are the growing trends in the IoT world to keep buildings safe from cybersecurity threats?
Well, it's kind of a good and bad, or two sides of a coin. On the one hand, I hear and read about and write about various, whether it's IEEE or consortiums and groups and regulators, really emphasizing cybersecurity, but to me, it's just an ongoing, black hat, white hat contest. And we read headlines and, breaches, et cetera, across the board, not just within buildings and utilities. But so I still sleep at night because I think the good guys tend to be winning, but it's a daily fight. I do think that the key players, the vendors, the suppliers, if you will, the buyers, I think just about all of us, we want to have secure systems, but the reality is the bad guys, they've got money and power too. So I guess I'm generally positive. I think cybersecurity has risen to the forefront in many cases, but sometimes it's all it takes is one bad actor, some person usually breaking the chain of security, and it's difficult. But I'm encouraged though that whether it's this quantum internet or future solutions that are really tackling it. And some people say, well, blockchain's the answer and all that. Well, maybe, but supposedly blockchains have their potential holes. I guess I'm a believer in the best spirit of the technology that good security, good cybersecurity will win. But you have, threats from different levels, and it's not one of those check boxes that you say, oh yeah, green light, we're all good to go. I think it's an ongoing, if you're an IT or an OT, the threat is constant. And I think that you have to bake that into your strategy. You just say, okay, we are going to make it our top priority as we do these other things as well, but don't think about it as an afterthought. That's my viewpoint, and I think that's what I'm hearing the best of the breed are doing. That security is top of the heap of what you have to do, but you also have to do these other things to enable IoT technologies and smart buildings to take off.
Yeah, and I also believe that it's not just a technological question, it's also a process and operations question. So there are existing operations when systems fail, but then now when you're switching from building automation systems or just only BMS systems, but then you're switching into IoT-based solutions, are you also updating those processes and those operation manuals? So if an incident does happen, then what are the actions that you take? And I think that's also extremely important.
Yeah, one last comment, and I use this more of a kind of a concept, but I think that again, this goes back to an operator of nuclear facilities and whatnot, that they've switched over the last few years. And it's nothing really brand new, but they've gone from sort of this preventive, defensive mode to more of a proactive, predictive cybersecurity stance. And I think that could prove really the way to go long term for smart buildings too, that rather than just put up all these walls and barriers, and not that any of those steps were bad or didn't work, but to stay ahead of the bad guys, I think you have to be as advanced as they are or ahead of them, predictive, and really have a bit of an aggression of protection mindset, as opposed to just, sit back in your building and put up walls. I think it's that plus some very proactive, if you will, predictive types of cybersecurity tools. I don't have all the answers, but I think that mindset is refreshing, and say, okay, we're not just going to sit back. We're going to be out there ahead of the curve as best you can.
Maybe we'll squeeze in one last question. I actually just want to jump to there. How to have a balance between robust optimal design, energy efficiency, and indoor environment quality. I actually wanted to steer you a little bit, Neil. I remember you were telling me the story about a hotel chain and how they implemented automation. Maybe you can tell us about that in the context of answering this question.
Yeah, sure. So the example it's the Grand Hyatt Hotel in San Francisco, of all places. Anyway, they wanted to lower their peak demand charges for electricity, and at that point, a couple years back, those charges accounted for 30 to 50% of its monthly bill. So they found a solution provider that used predictive analytics, and were able to install the software and upgrade their their hotel. And the impact is pretty interesting. At various stages of their deployment of this technology, they saw savings opportunities of again, this one facility, $2,100 per month U.S. And demand charges were avoided. Their payback was of their initial investment was in less than 6 months. Since they've installed what they call this automation or adaptive automation solution, they've consistently, again, this is pretty high, but they consistently see savings of more than 20% of the costs from their original control load. So, and they're seeing, I think this is really high, but their example, they claim an average monthly ROI of 41%. Pretty high stats in terms of percentages, but again, I think that's a fairly early adopter that got in at the right time. And again, it's around their high costs for peak demand charges. And again, it may be partly because it's in California, which has really high rates compared to even nearby states. So take the percentages with a grain of salt, but I think that's an example where a smart building deployment of these technologies really worked out for that particular facility.
Geez, Neil, I think that's all the time we've got. We're over a couple of minutes, but I just wanted to say a big special thanks to Neil. And thank you for taking your evening to spend some time with us and share with you from your really interesting vantage point and also what's been happening in the market globally as well.
Sure, my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Just 2 items as follow-up. For all the audience members and everyone that signed up, an email will be sent to all of you, and where you can download the free version of the white paper, which Neil helped us write. And then there's also a survey that's attached to that as well. There's still more webinars on our Sustainable and Smart Building series, as well as the other events that we've got lined up. So you can find all of them at clpsec.com/events. That's clpsec.com/events. Thank you all, and have a wonderful week. Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.